I'll finish up the topic of gradients here by showing you some neat 3D effects that you can create using some very basic gradients. So what I'm going to do is, just with my space bar held down, I'm just going to pan down a little bit so that I have some extra white space here to work inside. And you may recall from some previous lessons that we had some different computer screens and some different viewing screens. I don't know if you remember the lesson where we were invading Anytown, USA, and I had some computer screens with some metallic frames. And they're very, very easy to create, in fact. What I'm going to start off with, though, is I'm going to hit the D key on my keyboard. And of course, that sets my fill and stroke back to the default. And I'll go and create the shape that I'd like to use for my computer screen. So maybe I'll use my rounded rectangle corner here, and I'll have something like this. And what I'll do is I'll copy this guy, Control C, Command C on the Mac, paste him in front, Control F or Command F on the Mac. And then what I want to do is scale this guy inward just a little bit, and I'm doing that by holding down Alt and Shift or Option Shift on the Mac. So I have that, and then I'm going to do this one more time. Copy him, paste him in front, and then hold down Alt and Shift or Option and Shift and squeeze him down just a little bit. Now the idea here is I want this center path here to look as if it's a bevel or a 3D object here. So, and this is incredibly simple to do. You'll be amazed at how easy this is. Before we actually do this, take this center guy here and copy him. We'll need him in just a minute. You can deselect there. And then I'll take my outer object here, and I'll make sure that my fill is on top. And then over in my swatches palette, I'm just going to use our basic gradient that we've used all along, the black to white. There it is there. Now, I'm not too happy with a solid black to a solid white. This is where your grays come in here. So maybe I'll just quickly throw some grays down onto my slider here, down on my gradient palette, and pull away my pure black and my pure white. So now I have something like this happening. Pretty cool. Now, I'll do the same thing to this guy here. I still have my gradient sitting there waiting for me in my gradient palette, so I'll turn him on. Now, if I deselect, it doesn't look very impressive. But here's what I've discovered just through fiddling around and goofing around on my own, is that I can take a gradient and then reverse its direction. So rather than going 0, I'm going to go minus 180 to reverse it there, and now it looks like this 3D effect here. Pretty cool stuff. Now, maybe I want to have some kind of a computer screen sitting in the background. Maybe something like this here. And what I'll do is just very quickly fill this with an orange, for example, and I'll send it all the way to the back. Control Shift open square bracket or Command Shift open square bracket, and it disappears, of course, because there's no hole here. This is where compound paths come in. So I'll grab this guy here and this guy here. Command 8 to create a compound path, or Control 8 on the PC. Now there's one compound path. Now do you remember the shape that we copied earlier? I'll paste him in front. There he is there, and I'm going to use him to knock a hole in the outer frame here. So I hold down Shift and I select it, Control 8 or Command 8, and there is my computer screen. Now I can see a little bit of an edge there. That's no problem. I can just grab that and tug him in just a little bit. Perfect. Now it's just a matter of putting in some cool grid lines and text and Anytown USA, of course, like you saw earlier. So you can do some really neat effects, some really neat 3D effects, I should say, using gradients. Let me show you one more here really quickly. I'll create a perfect circle here and fill him with a gradient. I'll use one of my gradients that we used earlier. There he is there. I'll select him here. I switched over to the black arrow tool, by the way. I just hit V on my keyboard. I'll copy this object and paste it in front, and then shrink it down using Alt and Shift or Option and Shift. So I have something like this. And then all I'm going to do is reverse the direction of the gradient. In other words, the two shapes are both going to have the same gradient, but one shape has the gradient going in one direction. The other shape will, in a moment, have the gradient going in the opposite direction. Something like that. Now, that looks like almost like a concave shape there, a concave object. In fact, to make it look even more realistic, I'll take this shape here and remove the stroke. So now I have something like that. Looks even better. So you can do some really cool 3D effects here with gradients. Try it on your own, experiment, and especially try working with some gradients to get this kind of an effect using text.